put some more stuff in real quick.
Good evening. Thank you for joining me for another episode of JMKAZE podcast. Hit that like button and subscribe. Today we're going to be going over the final Orlando Anderson theory. And we've already gone through a few of the topics regarding Orlando Anderson. We're going to go back to how it all started. And we're going to go and figure out whether or not murder rap is a fallacy or whether it's the truth. Knowing me and what you've heard so far, you can already come to your conclusion that I believe it is to be a fallacy. So we're going to take you all the way back. Kind of sounds cliche, but we're going to take you back into a few holes in Greg Kading's story that don't make any sense regarding how this all got started. And we're going to go back to that fateful night when Jake Robles was killed by supposedly Anthony Wolf Jones, which was Puffy's bodyguard. So according to the story, and you can go ahead and go look it up in a book called Dancing with the Devil, written by somebody who was closely associated with Bad Boy Records. According to witnesses, several witnesses, matter of factly, Suge Knight and Jake Robles stepped into the club in Atlanta, and what had taken place basically is they approached a woman that they had known from some previous time back and were trying to speak with her, and essentially she just kind of gave an attitude and didn't really give them the respect that these guys are commanding. So what happened was they essentially started getting unruly. Jake Robles started saying, MOB, Bloods, this is Bompton, things of that nature. So it pretty much got a hand at that point. So there is a close associate with Anthony Wolf Jones. His name is Jason Brown. So Jason Brown actually exits the club before it all pops off. Security shows up. Officer Howard, off-duty Officer Howard, he was actually working that night as security. So he has to break up the melee. He essentially breaks up both parties, and then he goes to send Suge and Jake Robles out of the club. Well, what ends up happening is as soon as they exit the club, Jason Brown pulls out his gun and starts shooting at them. In that case, Jake Robles is hit, and according to Greg Kading, the whole encounter is witnessed by Officer Howard as far as there being somebody there with the powder blue jacket. And that person with the powder blue jacket, according to Greg Kading, was no other than Orlando Anderson. Now, how he came to this conclusion was when he gave a photo to Officer Howard of Orlando Anderson, supposedly. Officer Howard identified Orlando Anderson as the shooter. Now, the other supposed clue that Greg Kading laid on everybody was that Suge Knight says, I know your family, I know your mama, I know where you live at, such and such and such. Okay. Now, you can go two directions. To make his Orlando Anderson story sound true, he puts out those details. But you have to remember that Suge Knight actually knew Puff Daddy way before that incident. They were hanging out way before then. So Suge Knight could have been talking to Anthony Wolf Jones. He could have been talking to anybody else that was associated with Bad Boy that was in that club at that time. Now, the only suspicion that had grown, and the reason why Suge Knight felt like Puffy had a hand in it, was because Puffy showed up a little bit after the incident took place. So essentially Suge Knight had an axe to grind with Puffy, and it had only got deeper and it only got more volatile once Tupac Shakur joined Deathrow Records, because of course Tupac Shakur felt like the Notorious B.I.G. and Puff Daddy were involved somehow or another in that shooting. Now I won't say, and I'll go off topic here a little bit, I will say that they were not involved, but they essentially knew, Puff Daddy and Notorious B.I.G., that Tupac was going to get shot. Now the only reason why these guys didn't open their mouth, if you think about it, is they were dealing with some real gangsters. Haitian Jack, Jimmy Henchman, and the crew. So there's no way that Puff Daddy or Notorious B.I.G. is going to open their mouth, because they're going to be dealing with some real gangsters. And essentially, they were probably already getting extorted by these guys. So if you think about it, they're not going to go against these guys, because if they do, they're going to be in some trouble. So essentially, Puff Daddy and Notorious B.I.G.'s hands, they're tied. They got to go with the flow. If not, they're going to get dealt in as well. Back on topic. So Jason Brown shoots Jake Robles. Jake Robles, of course, he dies. Time passes. Anthony Wolf Jones is supposedly the guy that killed him. Going back, Jake Robles. So fast forwarding to 2002, Anthony Wolf Jones gets killed in Atlanta club, and they close the case. Atlanta Police Department closes the case on Jake Robles' murder once Anthony Wolf Jones dies. Now there's been other bad boy associates, and Loon being one of them, who doesn't come out directly and say that Anthony Wolf Jones didn't have anything to do with the murder, but kind of alludes to it. So there you go. If you can make your own conclusion, the person who was guilty of the murder was Jason Brown. So essentially, Deputy Howard lied about that night. It wasn't Orlando Anderson. It was Jason Brown. Who even? I mean, can we even really believe that Orlando Anderson was even there that night? If it seems like all these stories that Greg Kading put in Murder Rap are just there to make people fall for his lies. They try to connect a lot of dots with these stories that can't be vetted by anybody. And Officer Howard, how do we know he's not lying? We have a lot of police officers who have been lying. They go with the flow. We've seen it already with Tim Brennan and Bobby Ladd about this supposed gun that was in the back of Orlando Anderson's girlfriend, buried, and they took it to Nibin. And you can go back into my old actual videos and you can learn about Nibin. Nibin's a technology that actually is an algorithm for bullets and how they identify bullets now, so they'll be able to solve crimes better. It's a better ballistics test than what's been out. So you can actually go and look at that and you can make your own conclusion. Now, great point about the document. Doesn't even look like an official document, and I'm sure that the federal government, their documents are more official looking than what that document looked like. A typed up forgery with it looked like a badge or something of that nature. It doesn't say confidential, and the way they do things, federal government, is they essentially stamp these documents. If you go and do your own research on Google, you'll be able to figure out that they stamp their documents. And not only that, but think about it. Even if it was a official document, who exactly are they talking about that they had to hide this information to, as far as to not give any tips off to the culprits of these crimes? I mean, if anything, it sounds to me like the police were involved in this, but the reason why they couldn't release it, if it is a true document, which I don't believe, but if it was, they're not protecting the identity of gangbangers. Think about it. They're protecting the identities of police officers. So there again begs the question, what police officer are they protecting? Are they protecting LAPD officers? Are they protecting Compton PD officers? You have, as I go back and talk about Tim Brennan and Bobby Ladd. If you think about it as a whole police department, you got a bunch of crooked police officers, and you have 2, 3, whatever you want to call it, maybe 10% of the actual police department that try to walk a fine line and try to walk as doing police work with integrity. At some point, they're gonna get blinded by the money. They're gonna get blinded by the corruption, and they're gonna turn. So again, Reggie Wright Sr. and Reggie Wright Jr. These guys were influential. Reggie Wright Sr. was Bobby Ladd and Tim Brennan's boss. Okay, they're gonna protect their boss. They're gonna protect their department, and they're gonna protect the people that they know are corrupt, because them too are corrupt themselves. If it comes out that they were participating in any kind of corruption, they're gonna go to prison. And guess what? In prison, police officers do not do well. So you think about it. Do these guys want to ever tell the truth and ever roll over on their police department? Or do they want to play this game where they're making themselves look like they're the saviors of this case, and this long mystery gun finally pops up? This is not the gun. We don't have the FBI that's going to come on and vet this information. As I mentioned before, if the FBI knew that this was a real gun of choice for the Tupac or even Notorious B.I.G. murder, it would have come out a long time ago, and they would have vetted this information. The federal government, the FBI, they spent millions of dollars on the investigation, and you have this clown, Greg Kading, and his task force, which was a bunch of corrupt police officers with biased opinions and with the mission statement that they were going to certainly not do anything to find the real killers, because they know the real killers are ex-police officers. If they find the real killers, then Valletta Wallace wins her lawsuit. And we're talking about a major bankruptcy that would probably happen to LA, because they don't have those kind of funds. You see California already, it's already struggling with all kinds of budgetary and fiscal just ordeals that they can't even take care of. Let's go look it up. They don't have enough money for anything. So back when, I mean, it would have dealt a big blow to LA. So going back to Orlando Anderson is the other theory that I hear, or story that people have told, is that Orlando Anderson was into recording. He wanted to be an artist, and if he took the chain from Trevon Lane or a Deathrow associate, there's no way that he would have gone to Las Vegas to meet with Suge or to meet with anybody from Deathrow to give them a demo or to talk to them about a recording contract. There's no way. Now, the only way that he would probably do that is if somebody who had influence in Deathrow told him to show up that night, and then he shows up that night, and they beat the hell out of him. So it was part of a bigger plot. Now, who was that person that told him to show up? Who knows? We don't know if that's what the story was. So, if Orlando Anderson was part of, let's say, that shooting that night of Jake Robles, he probably would have been dead a lot sooner than he was. It was happening in 95. Tupac gets out in 96, and he supposedly kills Tupac on September 7th. So from 95 to 96, he definitely would have gotten killed by then, especially if he killed Suge Knight's, one of Suge Knight's really good friends. Okay? Didn't happen. Didn't get killed. He killed Jake Robles, nothing happens to him. He just walks freely. Suge Knight doesn't come after him. So that's how you know that story's a lie, because Suge Knight would have definitely got back at him. You mean to tell me from the time that he did that till September 7th he wouldn't have gotten him? No, he would have gotten him. So here again, Orlando Anderson supposedly shoots Jake Robles. Orlando Anderson supposedly steals a chain. Orlando Anderson supposedly kills Tupac Shakur. And with all three of those things Deathrow Records doesn't kill him. Deathrow Records doesn't hire anybody to kill him. Deathrow Records doesn't send police department, the corrupt police department they had, the corrupt police they had on their payroll. There goes to show you, folks, Orlando Anderson was not the killer. I mean, look at it. He kills Jake Robles, supposedly. He steals a chain that's probably worth more than $10,000. And then he kills Tupac Shakur the night of September 7th, supposedly. And then he doesn't get killed by Deathrow Records. He gets killed by some other guys because of a botched drug deal and money being owed and things of that nature. So, there you go, folks. Orlando Anderson is not the killer. He was a pawn that night. There was no bragging. The streets are talking. The streets don't know. I mean, this guy's gonna go out and brag and risk somebody turning him in for real. Like, that's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. Is a guy's gonna go gloating around and he knows that there's an investigation for Tupac Shakur and he's just gonna go gloating around that he killed him. No, those are just stories. Those are fables that people tell to make the story from their point of view more believable. Things of that nature. The little one-off stories that Great Keating tells that make stuff believable, like the whole guy with the powder blue jacket. Those are just lies. So just backtracking and just rehashing what I said. Think about it. Orlando Anderson supposedly killed Jake Robles. Orlando Anderson supposedly stole a chain that's, I can guarantee you, is worth more than $10,000. And then Orlando Anderson kills Tupac Shakur September 7th, and nothing ever happens to him. So that's how you know it's a lie. If he would have killed Jake Robles, he would have been dead before September 7th. If he would have took that gold chain the way they said he took that gold chain, he would have been dead before September 7th. He would have never made it to September 7th. So that's my point tonight, folks, is that you cannot believe everything that Murder Rap says, and you definitely cannot believe everything that Once Upon a Time in Compton said. The Lolita Files and Shem Brennan and Bobby Ladd are doing this because there's an agenda here, and the agenda supports Murder Rap. Okay, and this all ends because they don't want anybody to keep kicking over rocks and investigating the Los Angeles Police Department. They don't want it anymore. They don't want it. Every time someone gets close to unearthing a good clue, there's a roadblock. And there's a reason why. There's a reason why these murders are unsolved. When police are involved in murders, they get unsolved. Why? Because the police department that employed them will have bigger consequences to deal with, such as lawsuits and more investigations, where the FBI will actually come in. And I'm talking about not their little FBI buddies, because you have police departments that they have two guys that are working together, and one guy, he does great and ends up getting more education, and he moves on to the FBI, and they always stay buddies, okay? And then it becomes biased, because what'll happen is they'll call their buddies up for a favor. Okay, I need you to do me a favor. And an FBI official will come in who no one knows, it's unknowing that the guy that called him is his buddy. I'm talking about FBI from Washington that are going to come down. They don't have any relations to anybody in the department, and they do a real investigation. So think about all those talking points tonight. Orlando Anderson saga's done. I'm done with the Murder Rap for the most part. It is a lie. It is a fallacy. You cannot believe it. Quit listening to those stories. Great Keating's full of it. I want to thank all my subs, Jeff Keon, KTS, Cat Eyes, and many, many of you other. I can't name everybody, but I appreciate you coming on my podcast and listening. We're going to be coming up with more Tupac Shakur and other topics of interest here coming soon. I appreciate you listening. And as always, as I tell you folks, always seek the truth, no matter where it takes you. Have a good night, folks.